Last month I put out a video reacting to your guys' hot takes. Well, this month, it's my turn. Last month I had you guys jump in here and give me some of your hot takes so I could react to those. Well, this month I'm going to put myself out there and I'm going to say some things that I think might potentially be some hot takes. Also, feel free to jump down in the comment section and disagree with anything that I say or tell me just how wrong I am. And without further ado, let's get into the heart and the meat of the video here, my hot takes. Voice is more important than substance. By this I mean the voice, the author's voice, or the voice of the narrative of the book is more important than the actual plot or the plot beat or the mystery or whatever is being told to you in that book. The author's voice is more important in my opinion, because let's say if you have a book that has maybe not a whole lot's happening, you could have let's say you could have a book where absolutely nothing happens. Like there's like no plot to this thing. It's boring as shit. Characters aren't doing anything. But if the author has a unique voice or an engaging voice, the way that they're writing the sentences, the words that they're choosing to use, the way that the writing is put together, if I'm enjoying myself on a sentence to sentence basis, that can carry me through an entire book where nothing happens. Then on the flip side of that, you can have a book that has a pretty decent plot, pretty decent mystery, pretty decent structure, all of that. And if the writing is pared back to the point where it is so bland and so boring that I'm not enjoying reading the book on a sentence-to-sentence basis, and there is a lull whatsoever in that plot or that suspension where you go 20, 30, 40 pages in between big plot beats, you will lose me. I will be out. I'll be gone. I mean, I might not DNF the book, but boy, I'm fucking daydreaming. I'm out here all over the place because I'm not enjoying actually reading the book. My best examples of this is like a Philip K. Dick or a Haruki Murakami. Like 1Q84 is like a 1,000 page tome of a book, and I loved every second of it because just there's a charm and a charisma to the way that he's writing and the way that he's describing things. There's a charm to the way that he's writing. And if there is literally, like I said, there's very little that happens in 1Q84. A lot of people I've recommended it to are like, that was amazingly boring. And I'm just like, yeah, but the sentence to sentence pleasure of reading the words that he was putting down and the way that he was putting them down was truly next level. At least it was for me. So the author's voice is more important than the actual substance of the book. And when I say substance, I kind of mean maybe more like actually more like the plot of the book, but substance sounds more like clickbaity. So that's the one I'm going to use for the actual when I write it out on the screen. Horror is more effective when it's not scary. I know so many people that are like, that book wasn't scary, or I don't read horror books because I just don't get scared. And they try and they're just not scary. Well, I say horror is much more effective when it's not scary. Look at Pet Sematary. If you read Pet Sematary, that is the greatest horror novel in the entire history of horror novels, in my opinion. And I've had so many people that read that and they're like, but it wasn't scary. And I'm just like, I think you missed the point of Pet Sematary, because if you're looking for a scary zombie coming up out of the ground and doing a bit of the stabby, well, then you're going to have about 20 pages out of a 400-page book or so, and that you will probably walk away being let down. Now, that's not what gets inside you. What gets inside you is all of the psychological effects, all of the handling of grief and trauma and tension and just the eerie mood and the atmosphere. Look at Ring the book versus Ring the movie. One is this slow burn mystery detective story getting inside of the creep factor of everything that's happening with this investigation and the videos and everything that's going on there. The other is a horror movie with like shock value and jump scares and people crawling out of wells, and it's just, they take a very different approach to how they scare you or how they get inside of you. And I think horror books that are not scary are much more just lean into that mood, that tension, that atmosphere, and the psychological effects getting inside your head, tweaking on a certain emotion here or there and just pulling a little string as it goes along. Slow burn is a better approach for horror and more effective on an emotional level. Another example, I just got done reading The Only Good Indians literally yesterday, and it was phenomenal, absolutely fabulous. But if you're looking for like a scary book, that's probably not it. Once again, much more of a slow burn, back burner, just kind of eerie, creepy moods and vibes, living in some guy's head while he goes literally kind of insane for, it's good stuff. Horror's better when it's not scary. George R.R. Martin has absolutely no intention of ever finishing A Song of Ice and Fire. Now, I'm not saying he will not finish A Song of Ice and Fire. That's not a hot take. Everybody knows that. That is everybody's collective shared opinion, period, at this point. What I'm saying is that he actually has zero intentions of actually completing that work. And if he does, by any chance, if for some reason they happen to be published at some time, it will be posthumously. Dude's going to kick the bucket, and we're just going to have to dig through his journals and kind of release whatever he might have been working on. Hell, he might have both books done at this point, or at least a version of them, and he's just tinkering on them in the background, and he has no plans to release them ever. And I will go one step further in this tinfoil hat theory that I have and say that I think his trajectory, what he was planning on doing with the books, is shockingly similar to what happened in the show. And I think a lot of the plot beats that show hit, that people railed against so strongly and hated so much, were actually some of the plot beats, not exactly, but some of the major ones that people hated so much, I think were some of the plot beats that he's been planning from like page one. And it really gave him pause, and it stopped him dead in his tracks because he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to handle it. He doesn't know how to deal with it. Like take, for example, Daenerys Breaking Bad. I have been feeling like that is the one and only real true logical step for her character since I started the show and then also in the series. So when people were like, that Daenerys is a queen, you don't do that to her, to the show, and he's like, that's, oh my goodness. Like, and I mean, now he's got half the world like naming their children Daenerys and getting it tattooed on their arm. And he's like, oh no, how do I do this and not take that same flack that the show took? So he's either gun shy now and he just doesn't want to put it out there, or he's hurrying up, backpedaling and trying to like rewrite the narrative that he already had laid out in his mind. And he's kind of running into brick wall after brick wall. One or the other. Either way, he doesn't plan on putting him out, and he's just making excuses. Reading fiction is more beneficial than reading nonfiction and self-help books. I'm not saying you shouldn't read self-help books. I'm not saying that they don't benefit people. I'm not saying nonfiction is a bad thing to read. Read it all, please. But I am saying that, in my opinion, I think reading fiction is more beneficial than that other group. And this is a sad thing. And because in this day and age, most people really put that nonfiction and that self-help group like above everything else. Look at society at large. You'll see a lot of people like, well, I don't read books. And if I'm going to read a book, I want to learn something. So I'm going to read this over here. And they'll come up with some, self-help, nonfiction, something, at least I'm learning something like that's somehow highbrow literature or something like that. While this fantasy book with some half-naked people on the front of it, like Gardens of the Moon or something like that, is lowbrow fiction, right? And I disagree. I think you can learn just as much like actual learning from fiction as you can from nonfiction. And then on top of that, you're getting all the subtext underneath it, and you're getting all of these exercises in empathy and sympathy and compassion, and you're literally putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and somebody else's experience for several hundred pages. And then on top of that, you have all of the other skills that you're learning to read into the plot, the text, the subtext, and now you're getting critical thinking skills on top of not only learning how to empathize, but you're also learning how to, self-help, promote, move, make yourself better. Sure, there's also some good old schlock out there that's just for entertainment purposes. Read that too. But even then, I argue that you're getting those subtexts and problem-solving skills kind of baked into it. It's just an all-around good thing to do. And I would argue more beneficial than reading nonfiction and self-help. P.S. I have absolutely no scientific data to back up anything I just said. That is simply my personal opinion. I believe that Stephen King is a better author than we are as readers. Sometimes. Now, I will say, this is a big sometimes. Now, Stephen King is a character writer first. These characters are people to him. He gets inside of their minds, and he basically understands them through and through. Then he sets them on a path with an incident, and they're all going to be solving a problem, and then he won't know what that character is going to do until they get to the next problem. And when they hit that wall, he goes, well, how would Billy get out of this situation? And he problem solves from there. He outlines nothing. He just kind of wings it as he goes, and he lives in these people's minds for however long he has to, and he writes it from there. That, in turn, creates some weird issues, some strange plotting, some strange pacing, but I believe it also ultimately ends up with better character moments in the end than we would normally get, or we are used to getting, or sometimes we just want other things that the characters would never do, but we want it because that would be the more satisfying ending. But he doesn't give that to us because that's not what the character would do. That is, completely antithetical. Like, for example, other authors will plot things out very rigidly, and they'll get a character into a specific situation, and they'll have to do something very against character for that person. But they have to do that thing in order to get from point A to point B, because the outline says they have to end up here, even though in order to get there, the author is going to have to fudge some of their character and make them do something out of character. For example, there is some major plot beats, one in particular that I'm thinking of, I won't spoil it, that happens at the end of The Dark Tower, that everybody, once they got to it, basically wanted to throw their book against the wall. They were so mad at how Stephen King wrote it. But I argue, and it took me a long time to come to terms with this because I am a Dark Tower fan, and I was one of those people that kind of wanted to throw my book at the wall. I will argue that I think he actually made the best decision for that character, and it's more profound for the character in the way that it was done, even though it is also profoundly unsatisfying from a reader's perspective. But I say that is him being a better writer than I was being as a reader. Although some would argue that that's just cope, but I don't think so. Anyway, everybody, as always, the link for my Patreon's in the description below. The link for my Discord's in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.